Thank you very much. That's quick. Okay. Thank you. Can I just try, can I go without the mic? Okay. Good stuff. Can I just, thank you. Let's put this here. All right. Good evening, everybody. I just wanted to let you know that when I start presentations, I'm aware that we don't always discuss a lot of the founding and the formation of Bermuda. And so I always try to just do a couple of slides to just take us from where we are to where we could be very, very quickly. So this part won't take that long, but I think it's important that we know. So this is Bermuda in the middle. We sit on what's called the Bermuda pedestal. And as you know, Argus and Challenger Banks and the Bowditch Seamount, those are three other sort of volcanic spots. And so what happened, we're actually forming Bermuda. There was movements from 4 different types of areas. And so as a result, the volcano that formed Bermuda, unique on the planet. You know, I'm very rude normally, so I can just stop talking while everybody else is talking, because I get very rude when I feel disturbed. So I'll just wait. Can I have the mic?
Excuse me, everyone.
May I have the mic? May I have the mic?
So can you please just give the presenter, Mr. Butterfield, the level of respect? If you're going to have a conversation, you can take it outside. This information is very, very important to the history of who each and every one of us are.
Thank you, President.
Give your undivided attention to Mr. Butterfield. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. President. All right, let's start again, shall we? So Bermuda, as you know, we sit on top of a dormant volcano. That volcano wasn't just how we know plates come together and then there's an eruption. What happened in the case of Bermuda was unique on the planet. There were 4 different areas that came in. How do we know it's unique? Because a 260-foot rod was sent into the ground up by Southampton Princess in the 1960s. Regrettably, the rod just sat in Dalhousie University for 30 years, but then it was taken out and all of that soil was extracted and analyzed. And in Bermuda, our mantle and all of those chemicals and compounds, unique on the planet. There's nowhere else. That's NASA, Geographic, that's National Geographic, Discovery, that's them. All those headlines there. We are unique on this planet. Okay? Nothing else like this. So that's kind of geographical, and I will tell you more about the geological, but let's get to the human. And so we're named after Juan de Bermudez. We think he was born around 1449. We're not entirely sure, and died in 1570. Now, the interesting thing about this is, and I'm going to set this up quite early because I think it's important that we know, he was Spanish. I know you know he's Spanish. But we, the country, was Spanish way before the English. Okay? And I'm going to show you how the English did what they did to the Spanish in order to be where we are today. So we're named Bermuda after Juan de Bermudez. He was actually part of Christopher Columbus's crew and had gone all down the West Indies with him and was actually on his way back to Spain when he, if you will, discovered Bermuda. And what was happening, you would sail from the West Indies, go past Bermuda, you would take a right, and then go back to Europe, right? So this was the road. But he turned early, and so discovered Bermuda. We were known as the Isle of Devils. The reason why is because what's happening, if you were sailing at night, and think it's just the ocean, right? There's no engines, there's nothing but that. And the Cahals were all over this country. There are no predators. And so they had whatever they wanted. They're nocturnal. And Cahals screech at night. So at nighttime, you had the Cahals, screech, screech. You had the waves crashing on the reefs, and you couldn't get into that island. And then you had the low grunting of the hogs. We believe that some Spanish captains threw live hogs overboard so that they would make it to shore in case any sailors wrecked. They would have some sustenance. And so we were the Isle of Devils, and everybody gave us a pass for the most part. However, in 1603, Captain Diego Ramirez was wrecked here. Well, not quite wrecked, more like somewhere around here. The ship was damaged, and he made it in. So Ramirez sends his slave crew ashore to chop some wood to make repairs to the ship. That slave who was sent ashore is named Venturia. And as you know, we have a ferry named after him. Okay? Venturia was the first African that we know who stepped foot on Bermuda shores. That was 1603. Now, let me just go back and tell you, in 1593, okay, so 10 years before this, Henry May, an Englishman, was on board a French ship. The captain and the crew of that ship were full hot. They had been down to Haiti, and their payment was their height in rum. And they decided they would drink it early. And so when they came up to the Atlantic and went to take that right, they said, yeah, we're clear, Bermuda, we're clear. And they took a right and slammed into what Henry May, who wrote about this, said was a cliff 7.5 leagues northwest of Bermuda. That happened around sunrise, and they rode almost to sunset 8 hours to make it to Bermuda. Here's the issue. There are 55 men on board, but they only had enough lifeboat space for 26. And Henry May was the only Englishman. And so Henry May wrote this down and said, I can't believe they saved me. I was the only Englishman and I'm alive. And he made it to Bermuda. Okay? Now, here, the reason I told you all of that is because this is our crest. That is not the Sea Venture. That is a ship hitting a cliff. That's the Henry May ship. It's called the Edward Bonaventura. And the Edward Bonaventura struck a cliff 7.5 leagues northwest of Bermuda. That is North Rock. We have pictures of North Rock where men in suits were out there, sitting out there. North Rock was huge. Okay? So the captain struck North Rock. The ship was going down. They had these lifeboats. Henry May was one of the French that made it ashore. And that is why that ship is on our crest, because Isle of Devils, we were Spanish, we were discovered by Juan de Bermudez, right? Between 1505 and 1507. So how could the English claim Bermuda? Bermuda itself is a Spanish word. They put this on the crest and say, nah. That English guy was the claim. And so Henry May, that's what our crest is. It's not the Sea Venture. All right. So 22nd of June, the English, what's happening, the English are suffering. The French, the Dutch, the Spanish are all over this side of the world trading people, spices, money, gold, treasures, and they're doing it. And to make sure they control it, they are spreading Catholicism, the Catholic faith. English won some of this. And so in 1607, they head to Virginia. They name it after King James, so Jamestown, Virginia, and off they go. Little problem though, the First Nations who were already there were at war with them. Kill them on sight. Don't trade with them. And so they were suffering. By the winter of 1608, they were down to, I'll say, I've read the books, and I'll just lightly say cannibalism. That's how bad it was, because the First Nations were killing them for fun, and they couldn't plant or build, and so cannibalism. Somebody was coughing, you. That went on. And so back in London, the Virginia Company was there. The Virginia Company was trying to figure out, should we try to save this adventure in Virginia, or should we just let it go? And they decided one more push. And so the largest fleet ever assembled in England's history was assembled in June 1609 to go to Virginia. 9 ships. Okay, we know 9. And the Sea Venture was the flagship of those ships. As we know, they hit a storm Tuesday morning. That storm lasted, Tuesday, I could tell you, by Thursday, they were saying they couldn't tell whether they're looking at the sky or the sea because it was all black. They were stuffing meat in hulls. The crew had bailed 3 days straight. By Thursday night, they just said, later for it is over. And the people who were religious started praying and singing. The heathens just broke up in the rum and drank and partied and said, we're dead. It's over. But around 11 o'clock Friday morning, George Somerset sees land and tells Christopher Newport, who's the captain, yo, land ho. And so he sails as close as he can to Bermuda, and they get basically to some rocks outside of Fort St. Catherine. 150 people all make it ashore. And so what happens, Thomas Gates, who was going to be the governor of Virginia on the far side, and Sir George Somers, who was in charge of the fleet, they're here. Okay. Now, I won't give you all of it, and I'll just tell you it was not Disney World. Those two conspired and shot and killed a man because the man wouldn't agree. What had happened on the ship, and just think about this, right? If you're on a wood ship in the 1600s and a storm is tossing you left and right, you haven't seen any of the other 8 ships, and then you land in Bermuda in July. We're in Bermuda in July right now, right? So I'm just saying, but imagine, right? You land here, you did God save your life. And these two say, you're not going to be our servants. God spared my life to be your servant. And so people ran off into the forest. They ran off to go live alternative lifestyles. And these guys rounded them up. How do I know this? This book right here, The Many-Headed Hydra, is a book about the fight against slavery throughout the United Kingdom. Okay? And this book is a brilliant book. It tells you everything about how it happened. Very thick book. But chapter 1 of this book, is about the first act of globalization in mankind's history, where people moved and were moved for money or for commerce. And so globalization is what they give it. And so that book says that it has identified the very first form of globalization in their first chapter. And the first chapter of this book is called The Wreck of the Sea Venture. And so from here, this is what they say. Military men, and so Thomas Somers and Gates, who were Gates' particular military men, transformed Bermuda and Virginia from place of liberty and the fullness of sensuality. So in other words, the natural beauty and environment of this country should have led to a certain type of lifestyle. Instead, they changed it to a place of bondage, war, scarcity, and famine. By 1613, I'll explain what happens in 1612, but the colonists were starving to death. Bodies bent in blue spent their forces building the forts. I'll explain that to you in a moment. So what I'm trying to get at is what happened right from day one was not about peace and sanctity. It was about war and money. So although that was 1609, I have to jump a bit and tell you that we eventually went to Virginia in May of 1610. The Gates and Somers built the Deliverance and the Patience, and then everybody but 3 who stayed here went off to Virginia. George Somers hated that. He didn't like Gates. He didn't like being on the land. And so he told them, I'm going back to Bermuda to get some more provisions. You guys are running out of cahals and turtle meat. I'll be right back. And he went and didn't go back. He died in Bermuda in November. And his nephew, who was here, wanted to claim his large estate. But you had to have a body back in England to say the person's dead. I claimed their estate. And so they removed his heart. We buried that in St. George's. And his body was smuggled in a vat of rum and put on a ship and taken back to England. Matthew did claim the large estate. What happened? That went wild. I want you to imagine this. These people left England in 1609 in June, and nobody's heard from them. They show up after leaving the area in February 1611. So imagine, and the story they have to tell them. They landed here, right? It was full of water and turtles and fish and cahals and eggs. Paradise. So much so, they took water to Jamestown. Fresh water. Right? So imagine this story. Well, it went, I don't even know if the millennials have a word for it, but uber viral or viral or whatever that thing happens now, it went crazy. And so crazy that William Shakespeare wrote The Tempest based on William Strachey, who wrote about the Sea Venture wreck. Okay? So we came in 1612 on the Plow. That's really the ship that did it. So we talk about the Sea Venture, we talk about Somers, but the Plow was the first time people actually left anywhere and said, we're going to live in Bermuda. I'm getting to this emancipation part. Don't worry, we're just getting here, right? Don't worry, we're coming. But I'm just telling you, I've got to set this up so you have the foundation for the rest. All right. So 1612, 60 people say, yep, I'm going to go. And so some rich people built a ship, said, go, and you go. And that's the first time people came to live in Bermuda. And our first governor was with them, Governor Richard Moore. Okay. So 1612, the Plow came, 60 people. First governor, that's the first time people actually left, like to come intentionally live here. So if you want to talk about it, we were discovered by one day Bermudez sometime between 1505 and 1507. We don't know the exact date, but we do know it's not the 1503 that your generation taught my generation. And we know that simply because the two governments, the government of Seville and the government of Bermuda, met, talked, and realized Ace Boy wasn't even in the North Atlantic in 1503, so it couldn't have possibly been 1503. And the best we can say is sometime between 1505 and 1507. I then deleted a slide here that would have showed you the first time we were on a map, which was 1511. So we're going to go with, in the beginning, discovered 1505, 1507, one day Bermudez. Sir George Somers, you could actually forget about in terms of us, because the settlement or the colonization was 1612 with the Plow and Richard Moore. All right. Now, having gotten here in 1612, the Bermuda company that owned us, and so we were just an asset of a company, told the governor at the time, Daniel Tucker, to go to what they called the Savage Islands, at that point was Bahamas, and bring back cassava, this, and 2 slaves to dive for pearls. Okay? Now, the assumption was that Bermuda was full of oyster beds. Not one found. Not one oyster, not one pearl, nothing. In fact, there's a book called The Failure of Early Bermuda that I read. You might find it interesting because it's pretty cool. But Daniel Tucker himself was our second governor. Okay? So Richard Moore came, and all Richard Moore wanted to do was build forts. I'm getting to Emancipation. Tucker was the second. So the very first enslaved people were brought into Bermuda in 1616. 1 Indian man and 1 African man. There is a paper that's been written, an academic paper written about these two, so I can tell you a bit about those two. The paper talks about what they might have been thinking as they came over, because the role of water in the African tribes and the role of water in the Indian tribes, and looking at this new star. So there's a lot of information about what those 2 enslaved people would have been like and might have been thinking as they came across the water. So the very first slaves, 1 Indian, 1 African male. The next time, and I've just literally put this here because this story, it's one of those, but there was a notorious Bermudian named, I'll use his own name, Frith. And he lived out Spithead off Harbor Road, and I mean, a bad one, right? Really bad guy. So one day, he goes out on the White Lion, and his brethren goes out on the Treasurer, who happened to be a Dutch guy, and those 2, Frith and the Dutch dude, are big time slave ship robbers. And they go out and find this ship, and they steal their cargo. Happens to be Africans. So, Frith comes home with this cargo and brings them in, and the governor allows them to come in, but does not allow the Africans that are on the Dutch ship, the Treasurer. And so the Treasurer goes to Jamestown with this, if you will, cargo of Africans who have been enslaved. Those Africans were allowed off by the governor in Jamestown, and those are the very first Africans in North America. So that ship, if these 2, and what we did, had the governor in Bermuda taken them, right? And if you want to look this up on your own or Google it, the phrase is, and the Americans, this is a Google thing, 20 odd Negroes, right? So you say, how many? Oh, it's 20 odd, not odd like so strange, just quantity. And so that effort, was the first time you had, if you will, slaves that were from Africa because that slave ship had taken and brought here. This book I just put up here because, one, I need to tell you that the brilliant book, right? I don't know if it's online, download. I mean, big enough, it'll keep your door closed in a hurricane. But Michael Jarvis here, I actually met him the other day. He does great work about Bermuda. And this book, when I talked to him about it, he said the publisher wouldn't publish it at first because it wasn't academic enough. He said, I didn't write it for academics. I wrote it for Bermudians because they don't have a whole lot of information about their stuff. And it's an easy read, I'll tell you. Now, Jarvis and the race relations part, I these days talk on the radio a bit, and I just want to say that I haven't had the chance to set up what I would say before this book because we're still in the slave thing, but I'm going to take some time and just talk about this. So we had an agricultural economy, right? But Bermudians, and I'm not even saying just the enslaved African, but Bermudians generally did not like growing tobacco. And so we could not care less about the tobacco. And oftentimes there are lots of letters from the Bermuda company written to Bermudians saying you need to take more care of how you package your tobacco. Because by the time we're getting it, it's mildew, it's this, it's that, it's the other, and we just really didn't care. Now, what also happened, because the Bermuda company owned everything, they passed a law that we could only trade with Bermuda company ships. And so only the company made money. We weren't able to make any money. This got to a point where the settlers, or the Bermudians, because we started calling ourselves Bermudians by 1614, wrote to the king and said, King, we can't take this anymore. We need to expand the economy. We're not making any money. The company is killing us. And you know that the rats anyway. Do something. And so they had a hearing in London and found that the company was a bunch of rats. And the king agreed, dissolved the charter that the company had, and made us colonies of the United Kingdom. So the very first time we became a colony was 1684. Okay, that's when it happened. And in 1684, once we had that freedom to make the money how and when we wanted to, we switched from agriculture to the maritime. And that made the biggest difference in Bermuda's history. I don't even think international business today doesn't do what switching to a maritime economy did back then. And so what happened, the former enslaved people who were gardening and doing everything around gardening, now were shipbuilders, carpenters, right? Sail makers, sail repairers, sailors. And all of that changed. In addition, on these ships, I put race relations at sea because it is remarkable what happened on these ships. Okay? And so I can tell you that the slave crew was so well paid that oftentimes when they raided a ship, especially a Spanish ship, those men could have purchased their freedom that afternoon. They didn't. I'll explain a different story why they didn't. But we went from shipbuilders and slave crew to mates, captains. In fact, this book will tell you that the Bermudian slave sailor was so valuable for two reasons. One result of how valuable we were, I think it's kind of funny, but you might not. But what happened, the book says that we were vicious. So when you saw a Bermuda flag coming to you, you're like, oh, not the Bermudians, right? And like they swing a shoulder onto your ship all that went on. And they said Bermudians were the most vicious with machetes and stuff. Like if you saw a Bermudian man on your ship, it was over. I think we're not all of that violent. I think we're pretty tame people. But back then, and then the second thing was after we killed you and kicked you overboard, we could sail your ship back home. And so to the captain of his own ship, like the Bermudian pirate ship, he sees you, and we go, and then we all sail back home. And we were so valuable that oftentimes slaveholders, I don't use the phrase masters, slaveholders wrote letters to say, for instance, Corey Butterfield is a free man, and leave him alone. The reason was because if that ship was captured and those American or French, whatever captain knew I was a Bermudian slave, you're coming, you're valuable, let's go. And so if I was free, they thought, he may not be as good a sailor. The slaves are the good ones, right? That's how far it went on. Now, normally I tell that stuff after I have explained something. So I just need to do something, just a little bit here. When I say slavery was an everyday, regular, routine occurrence, if you go online and you look at the Royal Gazette, they go back to 1784 and up to about 1971 at the moment. This is on the front, the second page of the very first Royal Gazette that we have, the 1784. Okay, second page. The top is a ship, the Queen Charlotte. Okay, and it's lying in St. George's Harbor and will sail early February for freight or passage applied to the master on board. Or, if you wish to purchase some of the idle Negroes of this place in order to send them to a country where they may be properly employed, or should any proprietor of Negroes wish to ship them on their own account, they will be taken on board this ship in a manner that's advantageous to the proprietor. That was a ship saying, you got some lazy ones? I'll take them and sell them for you. Below that is a runaway enslaved Bermudian ad. Runaway from the subscriber, a Negro wench named Hagar. Her person slender and middling tall, yellowish complexion, a long jaw, has lost most of her foreteeth, and when she laughs, her mouth appears a little drawn. Has at times much affection by a haughty movement of her head and screwing of her mouth. Or a $4 reward for a Negro man named Kit. He is about 5 feet 7 inches high, has a short, thick beard, and is remarkable for his long feet, as well as his slovenly appearance. Or below that, Tim, belonging to Hezekiah Frith. I told you Hezekiah? Yep. Hezekiah Frith, yellow complexion, stout made, about 6 feet high, and a carpenter by trade. You know why I'm reading this to you? Not because, well, one, I know a lot of people don't realize we had slave auctions in the Royal Gazette like that. And so that's me letting you know quite regularly, easily, right? Imagine this is in the paper, right? Now, the other thing that I have learned from all of my stuff is we like to think, and us, like to think they didn't think we were human. We were subhuman, and so they didn't know better. Or they knew better, but they treated us like we were subhuman. Or something. No. I just read man, woman. They called themselves man, woman. And I have other ads, right? Girl, boy. So it's not like, and yes, they had mulatto and quadroon and all those other names as well. But they knew we were men, women, and children, and that's also what they called themselves. All right. This slide here, I'm not sure you can read, but I did bring it here. So this also about the regular stuff of the times. Okay? This is 1669, justification of slavery. What's happened? Instead of killing people, some very nice people wrote a petition to the governor and said, hey, governor, how about some freedom? You know, like this ain't right. God does not like slavery. This was his reply. Okay? Whereas diverse petitions have been exhibited to me desiring liberty and freedom. The petitioners, ready? I'll read this sentence. The petitioners not well weighing the just interests of their respected owners and masters to their persons being purchased by them without conditional limitation. Right there, they're saying the people who signed the petition did not take into account that they were purchased without condition. That's what they're saying, right? The interests of their owners and masters. And regarding the great benefit they may be capable of, admitted to a Christian state, so they were baptized. You can read, I can leave it up for you, but the short version here, and I'll leave it a minute, is this. We are enslaved. We write a petition. We don't kill anybody. There's no conspiracies. Not this particular group anyway. And the governor quotes Ephesians and says that you must be obedient. Okay? Goes on to say that you slaves who've been baptized owe your master more in case you thought it gives you more freedom. Okay? Servants are hereby advised and kings are required. And such Negroes as formerly or lately have been baptized by several ministers should not thereby think themselves more free from their masters and owners, but rather, by the means of being a Christian, obliged to a more strict bond. You thought I was lying there. When I said baptized, you thought I was lying. Okay? Right there. You're baptized, you know better, and you owe better. Okay? But I'm saying is a regular occurrence because it was. Okay? That's the ones I just read to you. Here's other ones. This is 1797. Okay? You pick up the morning paper, October. Right there. I blew it up right here. A valuable Negro man bred to the carpenter's benefit. Not raised, okay, or trained, right? I talk like that, okay? This one down here. For sale, young Negro wench, a good servant. I'm going to read you one other thing. And this, I had someone else, I didn't read this in a different place. But I say a different place, I mean the radio. But I didn't read it. I had someone else read this. But I'm going to read this to you. This is also from the Gazette. And I'm standing here because the light is nice on the page. About the year 1700, a gentleman living in Southampton, his great-grandchild is our neighbor. This is what this says. Told this story. That 2 slaves were left by a will to him. Their names were Deborah and Isaac. During the period, there was a great scarcity of coffee, and naturally it was very expensive. The question arose as to how to raise the money to send to the West Indies to obtain some coffee. After a good deal of talking, it was decided to send one of these slaves to the West Indies and there dispose of it for a bag of coffee beans. Then came the question of which one to send. Isaac could not possibly be spared, as he did all the chores, from calling the master in the morning and carrying him his punch to grinding the corn in the evening. At last, Deborah was sent. After a good deal of weeping and wailing, she was put on a small sloop called the Eagle in care of the captain, Smith by name, and he was to deliver her to the gentleman's agent. The amount realized for the sale of the poor slave was enough to buy a sack of coffee beans, 2 bags of coconuts, 1 jar of tamarinds, and a parrot. When all these things arrived, there was great joy in the house and neighborhood, and it was touch and go if Isaac was going to be seized on as well. That, was messed up as that is, right, is the story being told by the hunter. If the lion told that story, it would be, me and my wife were home one day. We knew the master was in a bad mood because he hadn't had coffee in a while, but did I ever dream that he would take my wife to go send her away to do work, but all I knew is he really wanted coffee. I heard rumors round the switch that they were sending my wife for coffee beans, and I said, no way. The English ain't that. You understand how that story would go on the flip side? You know what I didn't tell you? That story is in the Bermuda Gazette. And right here, this is a heading. You know, it says sports, weather, news, okay? The heading is right here. It says, our children's page. That story I read you is right here. There's a story for children. That was a true story. But if you wonder how the generational stuff goes and why an 8-year-old looks at an 80-year-old and disrespects him, okay, this is how it happens. And then this is the last one I tell you that I have to show you that's of any real, this is bad. Okay, this is a bad ad. Starting from here down. So someone who was a slaveholder is looking for his 2 enslaved Africans that went out on Boxing Day with the gumbays, and he ain't seen them. And this is now January the 10th. Okay, this is 3 years prior to Emancipation. Okay, but mentor, 36 years old, speaks sharp but incorrectly, walks quick. Ajax or Ajax, depending. Right, 26, large mouth features, dull head, cast on, dark colored Negro. It's this part right here. The deluded creatures are advised to come home. Deluded creatures. Okay, I'm going to show you how they deal with that afterwards. To avoid expense, fine, and beating, punishment, as they went off without permission at Christmas, following that idolatrous procession, the Gumba. The Gumbe. It is to be hoped that this late nuisance, the Gumba, and other clamorous puppet shows of the Negroes will meet the attention of all men of reflection. We are deluded creatures. They, men of reflection. Okay? That they will be suppressed, as none but the worst or most ignorant Negroes follow such ridiculous shows. Now, this is bad enough, okay? But let me tell you, I've seen this ad many times in Gazette. So, 50 years from now, and sometimes a newspaper says, 50 years ago, here's our headline, or 100 years ago. This ad keeps coming up. They stopped it, I think 1921 might have the last time I saw it, but they ran it quite often. Okay, so that's there. We also had some very unique punishments here, and I don't want anybody who goes to the gym to feel bad about what I'm about to say. But this proclamation that you can't see yet, there, right here, is for a punishment. Okay? Now, a punishment. So this slide before this, okay, this is a proclamation of a new punishment for slaves in the country. And this, I'm just going to show, is right next door. So, here it is. Whereas I have received a copy of his, in fact, I'll tell you what happened first. Out dockyard, a ship came in, and a whole bunch of black folks ran out there because the ship was so big, had all this equipment on it, and we could make money offloading the ship. And so, ran out to offload the ship. Some person said, do you know what you're offloading? And no, man, we're just look. And when they told them what it was, every man stopped. They had to beat people to offload the ship. It was for this. So, by December, declaring His Majesty's disallowance, with the advice of Privy Council, basically, these acts passed by the legislature of Bermuda. So this is the king saying, we've approved the law in Bermuda. And it is for a bill for regulating punishments on the treadwheel. The treadwheel was that thing that you walk, so now you're in the gym, people walking the treadmill, hey, listen to your music, it's all great. This was that water one on the dock. And it was so hurtful that if a woman was sentenced to the treadwheel, she had done something, maybe poisoned somebody and almost killed them. And even then, she might have to do 30 whole seconds. Like, that's how bad this thing was. And even for slaves knew that their treadwheel was very bad. The worst, though, was this. This is Flats, inland. This is the aquarium. Police Beach. Gibbet Island. Okay? You okay? All right. So, Gibbet Island is here, okay? Now, if you have played hangman back in the day, you've drawn a gibbet. So, when you're sentenced to death, and they say by hanging, what that was a noose around your neck, you're on the stage and on a trap door, right? And then the gravity pulls you and the rope. That's not what I'm talking about here. That's not what a gibbet is. A gibbet, you hang alive. Okay? And you're there day, night. Once you're up, you're up. They do not take you down. The only escape from a gibbet is your bones falling through those chains. I am well aware that I know a very tough story to hear. I look at the room and I think maybe I probably shouldn't give you all the details of this story. It's pretty tough. I'll just say this. There was someone who, I can show you right here. Okay. This is the Royal Gazette, right? 1923. Right here, there's a series of stories that they did called Tales and Traditions of Old Bermuda. Not all of them were as bad as this one. However, I did need to tell you what happened here. So this is a story that every Bermudian, they always had this, every Bermudian should read. And it's the story of Gallows Island. This is the story of Quash. Okay? And this is a story about 1753. This man's walking home, and Quash, a man who he had enslaved, did make an assault with a certain hatchet, which is owned by Quash. And it was in his right hand, and he struck the said John McNeil, his master, upon his forehead, 3 several blows, 3 mortal blows, and this, anyway, so they go on. Quash's punishment is to be taken back to the scene of the crime, tied behind a horse, dragged along the ground to here, and then taken in the gibbet. And so, I don't want to get into the gory details, but I'll just say that Quash ate his own shoulder to try to sustain himself. Okay, I'll just leave it like that. Now, I tell people also that some American Masters University degree students came in, and they studied Gibbet Island, and the Gibbet had done a ton of research. And what was odd to them was, if you watch those old movies in Europe, outside, before you get to the town, there's a skull or a burn. They say, this is what we deal with robbers, or this is a message. This is how we deal with rapists. They were saying that as high as the gibbet was on this island, but Flats was not an international port. So this wasn't to tell strangers. It was a message to black Bermudians. That's what these Americans said. Now, there's another thing. I don't think I have it. So let me round this thing off with Quash for you. Okay? So that's it, right? That's the island. It goes on here. Okay? And I just want to tell you how they end this article. Okay? They talk about Quash. They say he can only come down with his bones and blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. And then they end it with this. One would have thought the horror of Quash's death would have had the desired effect. The desired effect. Okay? But it had not. Any more, let me just say something there. I'm well aware, okay? I've been reading this stuff for a few years, and, but I want you to know this is some heavy stuff, okay? And I'm aware that it's heavy. I don't want you to think I'm being light and whatever. Okay, so I'm mistaken. One would have thought that the horror of Quash's death would have had the desired effect, but it had not, any more than the burning of Sarah Bassett 20 years before. Okay? This is front page Royal Gazette. There it is. So why? How is it? Why did it last in such a small population? And why was it here? So I'm going to tell you this here also. 1656. Big conspiracy. And let me just say, we've had a ton of conspiracies, slave conspiracies against the slaveholders in this country. I made a comment that, and I don't think it's a light comment, but Dr. Clarence Maxwell, his doctorate, or his thesis that got him a doctorate is called something like From Rebellion to Revolution, Bermuda 1700 to 1830. The book is all about slave rebellions in the country. The book, his paper. And it's 456 pages. Right? So trust me, not like a matchbook. Yeah, we tried. Didn't work out. This 1656, I thought was one of the first, that is dealing with. But when we read the other one just now, and it was saying, 16, whatever. Anyway, this is what's happened. So I'm going to take the time to explain this first paragraph because I actually think it's quite hilarious. But it's known unto all men who are or have been inhabitants within these islands that there has been a great care taken from time to time by the government here for the suppressing of the insolences of the Negroes amongst us and for restraining them from night walking and meeting together, and for other inconveniences that might grow, thereby hoping that every man would have been a fellow helper in cases such as these. What they're saying is, if you've ever been to Bermuda, or you spent any time here, you know we've been trying to control these Negroes forever. And from time to time, we get it right. However, we're finding that some of you all disagree with how we govern our Negroes, which is here. And that's why I said we would have hoped, right, that every man would have been a fellow helper in that case. But that's not been the case. And so, justice has proceeded accordingly, and you all will see now that without provision made for any further danger, and not being consulted on the second day by me and my council, now we have kicked in. So, the governor makes this proclamation. Okay? Number 1. It is ordered herefore that none of the Negroes of these islands, none, to no matter who they belong or whatsoever sort they are. That means whether you're free or enslaved. None of the Negroes shall have liberty to straggle or wander from their masters' houses or lands after half an hour after the setting of the sun without a pass or ticket under the hands to whom they belong. Did you get that? You're locked down half hour after sunset. Okay? Now, this is, let me go and say this part first. 1656. But such Negroes found straggling without their leave or their warrant or ticket, walking in the night, it shall be at the power of any Englishman that meets such a Negro to kill him then and there without mercy. And if any such Negro shall refuse to be apprehended and resist the Englishman, and the Englishman doesn't make a speedy chase to go get the Negro, well, and if that Englishman does not tell the magistrate, then they will forfeit 100 pounds of tobacco. In other words, the system, the Babylon system, if you will, that Marty called it, is ensuring that it's in the English interest to kill or report us to the judge. That's why I say black and white Bermudians were victims of slavery and racism. Not slavery, of racism. I'll do that. But that's just clause 1. Clause 2. That the Negroes that are free men and women banished from these islands, never to return either by purchase, by any man or otherwise, and paying or losing that money. Let me ask you, it's bad enough to hear what I just said, the free ones are banished and exiled. But who do you think was left? So if you're free black, you're wealthy. You run a couple of businesses, you may have a couple of shops, have a couple of boats, ships that are trading for you in the West Indies. When that black person is forced to leave, who do you think take over that business? The slave? So who's left? Enslaved black Bermudians. It's the plan. It's right. I didn't. Okay. You're still with me, right? Yeah. All right. Third. We're not finished. Third. Any of them who are still here shall not have any kind of trade or commerce within these islands. No merchant or any other man or woman for any commodity whatsoever. I mean, what are you doing to us? And if any man or woman shall be found trading, no, not Negro, right? So any man or woman, it means white, shall be known or found or seen trading, they will forfeit treble. So 3 times whatever you thought you got from that slave, you're going to be fined 3 times that. And then the rest is ensuring everybody who owns slaves takes them to church or make sure they go to church. That's the one there. Okay. This is the actual one. I think it came up earlier as well. 1669, after the petition. Here is, right? Servants, be obedient to them that are your masters in the flesh with fear and trembling, in singleness of heart as unto Christ. Not with eye service as men pleasers, but as servants of Christ, doing the will of God. And so they're saying, that's why we have to keep you enslaved. This book here, written by James Smith, and I've actually read a couple of things about him. Not bad. Really not bad. If somewhat incomplete, but it's this section here. Okay? James C. Smith was a white man. Let me be clear. Okay? But why then did slavery persist? Right? We're talking about 20,000 people on 22 square miles for 300 years. And I can tell you what was on the ships was not what was on the land. Okay? But how is it that you pass each other as slaves, right? So why did it persist? This is very difficult to answer. There's several factors involved. In the first place, as a British colony, we could not abolish it unilaterally without the British government. True, but really? Okay? True. And then that might have affected slavery in other colonies. And the sugar industry, right? Barbados, Jamaica, massive plantation, massive. Okay. Secondly, slavery was accepted by many as a way of life, supposedly sanctioned by authority and the Bible, and therefore morally acceptable. Another factor was the pride and satisfaction of ownership which some slave owners experienced, and there are several references being a status symbol. Okay? Still stronger, belief that Negro was inferior to the white man, did not deserve equal status. Couple of things about this. Number one, the part about the pride and the social status. By the spring of 1834, the government had to pass a law that slaveholders would be responsible for the crimes of the slave because the government knew the slave had to eat. The slave had to survive. And that a lot of these white Bermudians couldn't even afford to keep the slave, but would not free the slave because of the status symbol. And also, they knew that once it goes through, they were going to get paid from the UK government. And so that's one thing. The other thing, and this part about the Bible blows me away because the governor did use the Bible to justify it, but I don't understand how the same God that told you enslave those people and you thought that was right also told you to free those people and that was right. That God is confused. And God is not confused. So you aren't believing in God, right? But the point here is even the governor, 1685, okay? I didn't continue this on because the rest of it is kind of boring. But really, just the end of this sentence is that in 1685, the English governor told white Bermudians, why are you treating these black people like this? And they wrote back to the governor, you just got here. We do what we need to do to control our Negroes. Stay in your lane. I'm telling you, it was crazy. And so this was the part here, and I just highlighted the 1685, but that's pretty much why. But then we do get some emancipation. So in the Royal Gazette, they run a report that came out of England, and it says, right, this part here, the first and most important of Mr. Stanley's resolutions, and these were the committee in the House of Commons, relative to colonial slavery, was agreed to by the committee of the House of Commons on the 4th of June. And that is, that it is the opinion of this committee that immediate and effective factual measures be taken for the entire abolition of slavery throughout the colonies under such provisions for regulating the condition of the Negroes as may combine their welfare with the interests of the proprietors. Pause. The committee that then made the House of Commons have the vote, which voted to end slavery, said, consider the condition of the Negroes. And, right, the proprietor. But consider the condition. Well, they paid the proprietors and left us. Sorry. Okay. So, this is here. And if you come down to roundabout, there is still much to be done by the British government in the way of completing their bill, independent of what may be necessary for carrying the decree of effect into the colonies. So they've got to perfect the bill and then figure out how to make it effectual in all the colonies. Not least is an equitable compensation to the owners, which, by an extract from a letter from Trinidad, with which we've been favored, so they read a copy, 20 million pounds. But they go on to say, and we should give them a term of apprenticeship, and if we do, we should give them another 10 million pounds. The owners, okay? Not us. So the Gazette Rand is not really to read, but this, believe it or not, was printed in a newspaper, and I am actually, one thing I'm impressed, I'm not quite sure how this happened. This was printed in a newspaper in St. Lucia that morning and in Bermuda that afternoon. I got to hand it to the Gazette for that. But all of that is the stuff that came out of the UK, right there. So let me just go on. And this is the letter, believe it or not, right, between the king and, I'm almost embarrassed to say this, okay, but had the honor to enclose your information, the resolutions, so these were the individual resolutions in the House of Commons that led to the overall abolition. And so they talk about all this stuff here. Right, immediate abolition of slavery in the British colonies, subject to various conditions, regard proprietors, review of the interests of the slaves. This, from the slaves themselves. They have a request of us, because we're not been given enough for 400 years. So here it is. His Majesty, the Parliament, and the nation of Great Britain are entitled to expect and demand the most tranquil and orderly submission to such laws as shall be formed for future government in their state of freedom. Don't think free means actual free. It's the free that we want you to be like. Okay? And they told, I trust that their masters, they almost came out, were free. And their masters, the magistrates, and more especially the clergy of the established church, the ministers of religion, and everybody else. Okay? Dispel any illusions under which slaves may be thinking that the real nature of their changing condition is anything other than the gentle exercise of legitimate authority and influence. Right? Again, don't get it twisted. And these are the various resolutions. You can see them. They're quite specific. The entire abolition, all children born after the passage of the act will be born free. People now slave who are registered as apprentices, right? And the 20 million. Those are the various resolutions that came out of the committee. And this is the actual act here. Woohoo. Yay. Right? It is something. We should, it is something. And then locally here, what happened here? Well, here is the Emancipation Proclamation. Okay? Right here. And it says, whereas by an act of the Imperial Parliament, you know what? Let's just zoom in so you can see it better. A proclamation. Whereas by an act of the Imperial Parliament passed the 28th of August, 1833, right? So the year before, it is enacted and ordained that under certain conditions of apprenticeship and compensation to the proprietors of slaves, the state of slavery shall, on and after the first day of August next, 1834, be abolished throughout His Majesty's colonial possessions. Woohoo! And by an act of the legislature of Bermuda, made and passed during this present year, is provided that on the simple condition of compensation before mentioned, slavery shall entirely and immediately cease to exist in these islands on and after the first day of August next ensuing, without any further compulsory servitude, whether as apprentices or otherwise. Now, a lot of people thought we had apprentices. I've heard that a lot. We did not. Okay. Now, that's again the Emancipation Proclamation I just read. That's the zoomed. Let me just go show you that again. So I want you to keep your eye right here. I'm about to zoom in that for you. This is the Emancipation Proclamation. Slave auction. Negro woman Ruth, 45 years old. Negro woman Maria, 25. Negro woman Camille, 14. Negro girl Susie, 9. Negro man, 28. A woman, 48. The Emancipation Proclamation is right here. You really had to do this right here? Seriously? What's the message? You see the date. I don't want you to think that on the 1st of January, 1834, people were sitting around and, man, I can't wait for this slavery to end. Man, what are we still doing this slavery? They were still selling and buying 2 weeks prior. Nellie Muslin's book, Mind the Onion Seed, has accounts that white Bermudians were selling black Bermudians 3 and 2 days prior to emancipation because American southern plantation owners were paying top price. See, Dr. Eva Hudson made it clear. Bermuda's racism is not imported. She made it clear. I read her argument. I'm going to make the same argument for her later on. But not later on tonight. But I'm just saying, it's clear. It is very, very, very obvious. Okay? And these are the parish councils. Smith Parish Church, there's 3 of them. I think St. George's and maybe Sands. Well, and then, this talks about all of them. Agree that there'd be no apprenticeship in Bermuda. So there was no apprenticeship. Now, this other last sort of thing I have to show here isn't something that's well known. And I need to, it's closing a gap, and I'm stalling. I ain't gonna lie. I'm here stalling because I've got to tell you this, and I've got to close the gap, and I'm not real comfortable saying it, but I'm gonna say it because it is a slide. I'm not gonna skip it. But, so we had emancipation on the 1st of August, 1834. And as you can see, there were no apprenticeships to be had. However, we did have this. East, West, and Central, between the August 15th and the 31st of December, former slaveholders had the power to and must take their former slaves to the compensation commissioners of compensation, to appraise all persons who were slaves on the 31st of July in the Eastern District within these islands, so St. George's, Hamilton Parish, and Smiths, for the purpose of obtaining their relative value. Imagine you think you're a man August 1st, and one day in October, your former slaveholder says, hey, come with me. I got to go down to the district. And you go there, and 3, because we know who they were, Muslin, Trott, and Higgs. Right? And they look at you. And I guess you're, oh, here's a pretty good mason. Oh, he's got 10 fingers, 10 toes. Yeah, okay. How old is he? Yeah. 3,000. Next, right? Where's the dignity? Okay? And this is after emancipation. Okay? After August 1st, I should say. Okay? But that's how they got paid. And the people interested, be prompt to give the valuers the necessary time of judging the comparative value of their former slave. Like I said, the subhuman thing, they call us man, woman, child. They call themselves man, woman, child. There's administrate, like I said, this is papers. This is just administration. Right? This is not, you see no tears. There's no emotional stuff in this stuff. Right? It is what it is. Okay? And so we come to this. In 2018, This is the UK government. Okay? And this is what they did. What happened? Somebody put in what we would call a patty request. They call freedom of information. And the British government, you're getting tired, right? But the British government then published that answer as something they were proud of. And here's the answer. You asked for the following information. The person wanted to know how much money did the UK government spend paying off the slaveholders. In 1833, Britain used 40% of its national budget to buy freedom for all slaves in the empire. Britain borrowed such a large sum of money for the Slavery Abolition Act that it wasn't paid off until 2014. This means that living British citizens helped pay for the ending of the slave trade with their taxes. I told you they were fools. Okay? This is the tweet. Right here. 1833 to 2014. So the people who are saying there should be reparations, but I don't know what that money should be, they paid 190 years to pay it off. How much money Musk got? Bezos got? Right? I'm not really coming down on the reparation side either way. I'm just letting you see that when you're having those arguments out there, when you're talking to people and they say, well, how much would that be? Well, I don't know, but I'll tell you how long it took them to pay off them. 200 years, thereabouts. Then we had a few small changes in the ads. Okay. So now they want to hire a middle-aged woman as a laundress. Not a Negro woman, not a slave, right? Now it's a middle-aged woman to act as a cook and a house servant, right? Slight subtle change in how, in at least class, a little bit of class. Let's see. Right.
Were they still staying on the property of the master?
So Musson says in Mind the Onion Seed that day, that the morning of that first Emancipation Day, there were old slave holders trying to negotiate rates with the new slaves, and other slaves like, I ain't getting back there for nothing. So it was some people trying to become their own tradesmen. The slave holder was trying to get the slave, hey man, I mean, we can work out a price, right? I mean, you made all this time, I gave you room and shelter, I can charge you rent now, and all of that was going to, so I don't know the rest. I'm not entirely sure. Oh yes, this was a letter to the editor by Amicus. Okay. And this is February 1834. This is prior to Emancipation. And I just put this in here because it's local reaction. The parish councils, right? This second was dealing with the local reaction to emancipation and the likelihood. So that same Amicus, right? I'm highlighting this here. So he wants the slaves to go to the governor, by a memo setting forth their joy and grateful feelings for the emancipation. And then ask of His Excellency to go to the British government and get a loan for their establishment to be returned from the produce of their labor in the term of an apprenticeship. Okay, so this boy thought we're going to be apprentices, and therefore get a loan from the government so that they can pay off the loan with their apprenticeship work. Watch what he says next. The British government perhaps would be more readily likely to grant a loan to the emancipated slaves of this colony if they would consent to return to Africa, from whence they originally came, or to go to some other part of the British dominions and settle, as there's little or no room for them here to exercise their talents and industry. We could do it as slaves. You ain't got no room for us if we're free. It's a letter to the editor. Yeah, sorry, a printed letter to the editors, really. Now here, some lovely, and I don't want to offend anybody who might be from Paget, but Paget, other than Audrey Paget, is not known as the toughest part of Bermuda. Okay? And so the people from Paget wrote this lovely letter. In consequence of the great blessing, freedom, in case you didn't know what we're talking about, that has been conferred on us and our neighboring brethren by our most gracious and sovereign Lord, King William IV, the British Parliament, and the legislature of Bermuda. We, the colored people of the parish of Paget, take this opportunity of returning our most heartfelt gratitude for their generosity and to the white population in general for their extreme politeness and unlooked for attention on that happy first day of August in so readily giving up their pews in the parish church. That we might be the more commodiously accommodated so as to hear and understand the address intended for us and join in fervent thanksgiving anyway. Right? So they go on. And it is, it's sincere. They are, they're thanking folks for the freedom. Now, we also had the Friendly Societies. They were formed to help newly emancipated black Bermudians to start their new life in Bermuda. And here, I had the privilege of addressing a group of them at an event last October, and someone in the audience asked me a question, and I say it, and I'll say it again. I felt and feel the Friendly Societies are about empowerment. They were about, I said this in other places as well, that if the government didn't care about our health, and so we couldn't get into the hospital or go other places, the Friendly Society members became nurses and trained other nurses and took care of us. And when the government said, we don't care about how much you learn, or they went and became teachers and created the BUT as well. So the Friendly Society just did what we needed and what had to be done as a society, as a community. The political parties, not as much. And I'm just not as much and sliding right through that. Okay? And again, another quote, that black Bermudians in the racist and demeaning social environment of the times, any attempt by enslaved to assert their competencies was hammered. The extreme privacy meant the Friendly Societies required. This is Mike Bradshaw I'm speaking about it. And I can tell you, the Friendly Societies, I don't know, I wouldn't be here without them because I have to do it now. Sorry. No, it's just, it came out and I didn't mean it to, and I told myself earlier not to mention it, but I am a descendant of the Enterprise slaves. So the Enterprise that came there was a slave ship called the Enterprise. It came into Hamilton Harbor thereabouts on the 11th of February, 1835. There were 78 enslaved people on board. And the captain was named Elliot Smith. Richard Tucker, the man who launched the Friendly Societies, heard there were slaves on board and took out a lawsuit and sued the captain. The lawsuit was habeas corpus. Bring the bodies before the court. And all 78 had to come. Well, the captain disagreed. And he said, this is my cargo. There's nothing to do with you. I just happened to be here because my ship was damaged. And they said, we don't care. You're served. It's all right. I'll check you in the morning. And like, oh, no. You're waiting for the tide to rise. You be all right. You're going. This court case starts 9:00 tonight. And so all of the slaves came ashore at Barsley Park. There's a statue there called We Arrive. That real We Arrive is in recognition of that. So that's Richard Tucker. Too bad if we only had any national heroes in it. We didn't have enough this year. Man, Richard Tucker. Anyhow, I must again. I need some food. Okay, so we moved on here. Somebody said there's some Bermuda biographies online. I think the Friendly Societies also have done quite a bit about him. This is 1835 or 6. So the second anniversary of the abolition of slavery. Divine service in most of the churches, the chapels throughout the island. Then the Young Men's Friendly Society performed a procession at the usual places of meeting, and then walked home to St. George Church with flags and banners. Okay, that was then. And we also have this from the first day of August, and it says what we normally did to celebrate, which was generally church and then individual sort of parties and celebrations around. This one here I have up just as a sort of bit of a joke, because we've come a long way, and yet, if I'm not a slave, how in the world are you putting up a runaway ad about me? Okay, how is that? Now, what we read was a little heavy, so I want to read you two things that, before I just get here, very shortly. It was hard being a slave, obviously, and I haven't shown you a lot of stuff about why you were sent to death and for what reasons you could be killed or hanged, a ton of that stuff. But when I talked about the enslaved sailor, I didn't do justice because I hadn't done the setup work before. But I do want to tell you about this. The slave sailor was so valuable to to the black community in the country, because they were able to trade when they went on these voyages. And so the bakers who wanted flour, and the seamstress who wanted fabric, and the people who wanted gold or glass or rope or twine, that's who did it, the enslaved sailor. I keep going down a rabbit hole on that slave sailor, and I went too far. I should have stopped here, and I read one more thing, and it took me here, which wasn't great. So, up here, wow, we were pretty good at this. One level down, we were so good at this, and really good, but the captain turned a blind eye to it. I was like, man, I thought we were smugglers, like even smuggling from the captain, but the captains knew. That was where I should have stopped, and then it would have been cool. The captain was, because what the books say is that the captain was trading for his stuff, but what got black Bermudians the stuff that black people wanted was from the sailor, right? And they went to, and so had I stopped there, it would have been cool. But the author said a lot of the captains agreed because that made a stable slave. Because why would that person run away, abscond, do anything else if they're making money by doing this underground economy and they're supplying people over here? So they would stay because they were actually making money and doing the thing. The books say that, and I was saying to you earlier, that there was so much money to be made. These guys could have bought their freedom in an afternoon, but they said that they used their money to increase their quality of life. That they did that for personal adornments and everything else to have a better time. And on that front, I'm going to read to you about two things. One was his letter to the editor from 1796 and 1797. The first one is a complaint about people out country partying at night. Okay. And so this is what they say. The extraordinary exertions made by the Negroes in this hot weather in dancing must debilitate them beyond measure and render them incapable of labor in the day, to the great loss of their owners and the hurt of themselves in their health. It destroys their constitution. They don't know us, right? That's party. Now, that's, you see what I'm saying, right? And check this, right? That was the country. So now I'm talking about the town. Okay? Their balls, sanctioned by the magistrate, so the judge gives us permission to have these parties, okay? The balls, sanctioned by the magistrates, held 2 or 3 times a week throughout Bermuda, are sumptuously provided with, ready for this? Turkeys, pigs, hams, fowl, wine, brandy, and every other matter in taste. At one party, we are authorized to say there were 15 fine turkeys set on a table, nearly as many pigs, 5 quarters of veal, 14 fowl, etc., with a great plenty of wines, brandy, and other liquors. Their dress at these balls exceeds those worn by any of the whites on similar occasions. Where or how they procure these matters must be solved best by those who are encouraging them. But while such proceedings are encouraged, no person can wonder at the continual theft and nightly depredations that come from this. So basically what it's saying is they're partying, they got food, they're having a great time. We don't know how they're doing it. And there you go. Is somebody, can I see 1 minute very quickly? Because this is can I just show you something here? You see this? This is a whole new thing. Right? So, yeah, it's up to you. No, I'm cool, but you better check. It's up to you. Let me do 3? Okay, so what's happened, everybody? Thank you very much. What's happened? I've ended what I would do about slavery and that part, but have this here. So rather than keep you long until I was just trying to figure out whether I should just say good night to everybody and not even let you see this, or just let you see them. And so that was, we just had a conference here, and then I made a decision that I'll just say, you could, I don't know how you dismiss or adjourn, but I'm just going to stand here and just, oh, well then, okay, cool. Then I won't. So that's them that's the fellow of 1902. This, two good friends, Calabash and Simmons. I actually know where Simmons' bat is. And we're trying to get it here. So on the left, Nicky Calabash of St. George's. Right is Simons from Somerset. I don't even know what that place is. I do like that place. And that was, yes. I know where I am. Okay. And this one, yeah, you can leave that out. This one I actually like. This is 1906, right? Our grand excursion. So we're leaving Somerset, going down on a boat, right? And you can go down and you can pay, what was it? Oh, refreshments on board. An orchestra is going to be on. 2 shillings, right? This part cracks me up. The boat will leave St. George's as soon as the match is over. I'm like, get us out of here. we ain't hanging around. Wow. Okay. This was the argument. Somebody wrote in 1909 that we shouldn't have Summer's Day. We should have Discovery Day. And that Discovery Day would be on the 28th of July, because that's when the Sea Venture people arrived in Bermuda. And so we should have Discovery Day, rather than Summer's Day. Dale Butler, oh boy, this is the worker's voice, okay? Vexed. Butler is vexed. Okay, but he says, blacks traditionally recognize August 1st as Emancipation Day, and this is also talking about the Summer's Day nonsense, right? So this is furious, okay? But over the years, been repeatedly told to forget about the past and look to the future. So, blacks have been supposed to remember from whence they came. Little is being done by the Ministry of Community Cultural Affairs to rectify either situation. This sentence is hilarious coming up. To make matters worse, in my opinion, one local radio station played nothing but reggae during our 2-a-day holiday, which is the only doubleheader of its kind. The only music that should be featured in those 2 days should be local music by Bermudian artists. There you go. So Butler, oh boy. Butler was in. But, as you know, we changed Summer's Day to Mary Prince. Okay? And so we have Mary Prince Day now rather than that. This is 1922. The only thing I used to say about this picture was, boy, there's a lot more fabric at Cup Match than we have these days. Just saying. There's a lot of fabric, a lot of yardage, right? Now, we just, this one, because I left this slide in, and for you in the room who suffer from dyslexia and you think blue is actually 2 colors, I said, just saying. So, the next slide, I just wonder, who won the 50th anniversary of Cup Match, right? So, in this should be it, I think, 52. Yep, the golden anniversary, right? Right here. Oh, St. George doesn't say, does it? Oh man, let's see what we could find. All right. St. George's wins by 9 wickets in 1952, right? So the official record started at the official records, 1902, 1952. Right? But you see the size of this? This is a fish. This is actually a ray. This is real. This came out of the ocean, right? So I read that story looking for that story. A manta ray. Okay. So that's St. George's. They win, and that's them again by their 9 on the 50th. This I thought was kind of funny. Not funny as in, ha ha ha, but to take x-rays and to get x-rays by the TB Association, the Cup Match players started the trend. So I was like, yeah, they should have done the COVID vaccine trend. How many players would have, no? Okay. I should have kept that one to myself. That's maybe one I shouldn't have said. Then here, this was 1975. You have left to right, Clive Burgess, President of St. George's, Alfred Simmons, past president right here, Warren Simmons, honorable president, and E.T. Richards, closest to me. Okay. 1955, St. George's, majorettes. This is from Fame. By the way, all these pictures are from a Fame magazine. Mr. and Mrs. Archie Miners, 1956 Cup Match. And the pictures of the fellas here, right? Cool cats. Cooling out there. The Fame. We don't have to worry about him, do we? Yeah. No. All right. That's Clarence Parfitt. He's 19. Elmer Champ Hunt. Sorry. It was showing this next. That's all. Relax. Champ Hunt. That was 1932. He bowled 3 batsmen in 3 consecutive balls on that Cup Match right there. Then we have this fellow here, Clarence Parfit. He's a 19-year-old. He took 7 wickets for 20 runs in the first innings and 8 wickets for 23 runs in the second innings. We don't need him, right? We don't know. 65. Oh, you knew that? Somebody, 65. Yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. Right? And then, this magazine covered how we got to today, Percy, my cousin, right? And so this story here is pretty funny, right? But it's about bullying the politicians to tell them we were going to do it anyway. Just a couple of ads here, various times. Thanksgiving, this is on the centennial. So 1934, right? The Friendly Society is having a mass Thanksgiving in St. George's for, Emancipation. We don't need this. But look what happens in the centennial. Right? So here we are. 1934. Okay? We win the century of emancipation. So you all got the 50th of cup match, but we win. You see, 10 wickets. How many people play cup match? Isn't it 11 on the team? How many 10? And that's the recorder, right? So the recorder, oh my word. Well, I'm just saying that's the recorder and the recorder, but the Gazette confirmed it. All right. Damn. They avoided the follow. Look, follow. Well, we'll see. And so let me I'll end this. This last little part here this is an editorial, and I only have this here to get me to read this part. This is an editorial from the Recorder newspaper in 1936, and the editor is vexed. And is vexed because they've had the Easter parade, and now we're having cup match, and this is now after cup match, and he's reflecting on these two events and how different they go. I'll just put it like that. So this is the editor. We are a patient and long-suffering people, but there is a limit even to our endurance. We have seen that where we are given a minor part to play, we do not grumble, and we try to do that little bit well. That's talking about how black people are not involved in the Easter parade. Where, as in the cup match, we play the major role, we try to be the perfect host and leave no stone unturned in order that our guests may thoroughly enjoy themselves. We see that this has failed to move Pharaoh's heart. Our road remains as rocky as ever. Empire Games and Olympic Games come and go, and we are completely ignored. The doors to the civil service are securely locked and bolted, despite the fact that our schools are annually turning out persons who are qualified in every way to enter. We must not lose heart or give up. Sooner or later, justice must triumph, and conscience will force our brothers to change their present attitude. We cannot forever break bread at cup matches and assist in pageants, and yet be denied elementary rights. The colony is too small to have divisions. We must cooperate more, and as long as we are willing to meet the other fellow more than halfway, as we are doing at the present, then love's labor will not forever be lost. And the title was Love's Labor is Lost. That was, 1936. I think that was A.B. Place at the Recorder. I think it was Mr. Place. And this is just a light article. I'm not going to read this. I know the time. But somebody wrote in the worker's voice why Somerset should go for independence. And Somerset should be independent. And it says, independence of Somerset would be ideal for Somerset people who are taxed with such great resources and have little representation. Our people would be known as Somerset onions. I'm going to jump over here. It is evident that if those people in the city of Hamilton don't want to let go of mother, meaning England, then all our Somerset boys, for an independent Somerset, have to say, goodbye, we're going to take up the bridge. We have a police force for internal security, a fort to defend us against external invasions, hotels, a dockyard for industry, and a school for the education of our children. Plus, we have low-density living areas. So we, the successionists, say farewell, and may your fate lead you to wherever your fates lead. For our motto will be one nation, Somerset for cup match. But seriously, now that we have had our laugh, and the first part of this article is strictly for laughs, we are dead serious about the destiny of our country. When, therefore, shall we begin to prepare our people? When shall we identify the challenge for our youth and get ready for the inevitable? So, that's it. Thank you very much. That's it. That's it. Now I'm sad. Thank you. Sure. Yep.
One question.
No. Well, that's a good way to think of it, actually. That's a very good way to think of it. Except we were independent, but the company, so let me just repeat in case you didn't hear that. What the question was,
Repeat the question to
yeah,
the watcher.
The question was, given we became a colony of the United Kingdom in 1684, is it right to say we were independent first? Yeah. And so that is true. So what happened in the Virginia, they did a BF&M, right? So the Virginia company was there and they had Virginia, right? And they ran Virginia. And then wrecked and found Bermuda, and Bermuda was turned like it was paradise, including 80 pounds of ambergris that was found, right? So to them, it was great. Well, the Virginia company owners incorporated the Bermuda company, right? They then put all their shares over there and kept selling shares in the Virginia company. People thought Virginia company included Bermuda too. BF&M, Bermuda Fire Marine, same thing. That's what happened. So we became a colony in 1684. That's interesting. The charter that was used said that we are going to treat each other as if we were in England. So a lot of the laws and stuff was as if we were in England. But you're right. We were not under the king. That's a good point. Yeah, you know that. You know it.
I have a question.
Sure.
Why isn't this information in the curriculum in our schools? I mean, this is some brilliant presentation tonight and very educational. This is our history. This is our history as black people.
Remember I said I'm doing history and slavery, not politics? Thank you. Thank you very much for that.
No, I put it out there.
Oh, hold on. We have an educator.
Thank you. Repeat that. For those that are watching.
Yep. For those that are watching, we did hear from an educator that's in the room that said a lot of the information today is in the curriculum, not to this level of detail, but the general information is included.
Good stuff.
That's a good question.
I think one of the things that we absolutely have to, as people, one of the things that we absolutely have to get in our minds, I've said this before, my sons here, it is not the Ministry of Education's responsibility to teach him the history of Bermuda. It is our responsibility to teach our children the history of Bermuda. And if it means that you have to take yourselves to the library, nowadays everything's right here at our fingers. We adults, we have the responsibility to teach our families this information. It's not anyone external to any one of us responsibility to teach the things that we want our people to know.
Absolutely right. Absolutely.
I just want to say with response to that, it's easy for you to say as a responsible parent. Many of us do not have the ability. Many of us have come through a different path, and we are not the people we were yesterday. So yes, it It has to come where all of our children must go, and that's through the school system.
Good evening, everybody. I just want to say, as a senior school educator, I must say that Corey, you did an excellent job here. We do have this information available to our students. It has become mandatory that they do this before they graduate now, which is a plus. Like the other educator said, it's not in as much detail, but we're getting there. Mm-hmm. And ma'am, yes, it's going to take work, and we need to put a bridge between the generations so that our children can learn the history and their history. But we just need to work together to do that.
Hi. Yep.
Okay, now, I mentioned on the radio yesterday
Yes.
that what we have seen from Corey and heard from Corey these past weeks over the radio station. Do I need to stand up? Y'all can hear me? Okay.
Right near to you are.
Okay, Travis. Okay. And so I was thinking, is there a way that we can get this in a documentary? Something that where we can, and there are many black persons who handle documentaries here in Bermuda, and we can just do that, and then it could be shared in the schools, because you're hearing your voice, a documentary from you sharing this, and it's going to be in segments. It's going to be about the seafaring, say the slaves or all like that. It's going to be about the petticoat, all that stuff. Yeah. Different segments of it can be put in a documentary that's there and can be passed on. We got to save this.
I think you're right.
Record what?
No, you're right.
That's my friend, Travis. Okay.
No, but I think
I'm trying to say that we need.
We got you, but what your friend just said is that this is live. The presentation's there. I'm going to put it on our YouTube channel, and for those can take it from there. TNN, it's YouTube at youtube.com at TNN BDA, and you can take it and break it up into segments. So thank you for that. In your blue, it's like Corey said, in your blue color.
All right. They've asked me to take one more question. The committee said we can take one more question. Or maybe we'll take two. Right.
Is there anything, documentation, that you have come across that did not deem us as full human beings?
Repeat that question.
Okay, the question was, did we have any documentation similar to what was in the U.S. about black people being 3/5 of a human, sort of thing? Was there anything that specific in our documentation? I haven't come across anything that specific, because I actually think that, I'll give you an example. One of the things that I just found, I can't trace it. They wrote everything down for sure. But let me tell you this story. I told this story the other day about Black Mole. It's a woman, M-O-L-L, right? So there was a case ahead of hers where somebody from Sands was found guilty of an unnatural act and was sentenced to die. Then it was her case. And she was convicted of going to a house at night and stealing red waistcoats, aprons, handkerchiefs, bunch of stuff, purses, and found guilty. She was sentenced to die, but they didn't have an executioner in the country at the time. She then had a second case against her as well in the same hearing and was found guilty of that case as well. For her sentence was to be made the executioner. For the white guy. And so she then killed when she got the instructions from the government to show up and execute this man. She showed up and executed the man. And I don't understand how they gave that to her when we couldn't even give evidence in court. Like, our evidence wasn't taken. And so what was happening, a lot of the white slaveholders would do stuff in front of slaves, knowing that evidence wouldn't be heard in court anyway. And so the government had to do all kinds of stuff when it came around to evidence in court. So I don't think that they bothered with percentages. They just cut us out or used us how they wanted us. Cool? I think that was your brother Franklin? Oh, sorry. Yes?
Yes. Is there a record of the population number at the time of the emancipation?
Yes. I don't know it, but there is one. I'll listen to tomorrow and I'll have it for, oh, do you know it? You might know it actually. Oh, okay. I'll say it tomorrow.
I have.
Oh, okay.
Population of Bermuda was a total of 9,125, and on
Good question.
1833, population was 4,297 were white, 3,612 were slaves, and 1,286 were free blacks.
Oh, right. I'll say it. So what was happening? So the question was, what was the population at Emancipation? And it was roughly 9,000. I'm just doing this for the people who might be listening. There was so many other things. Oh, right. One of the interesting things I read that I had to get my head around, because quite often they would make free black people leave Bermuda, like often, just get out, and would leave the enslaved, right? So the generational wealth that would have been built up by those people hiring black people and training black people, and right? That's gone. And so one of the things that I say about all of this stuff is the power of I didn't know, right? And so if you are told to a white person, friend or enemy, and this stuff comes up, you've got to be a psychopath to not have some sympathy for the story, right? To not realize, and I've said to people, if the government isn't proactive, if the country isn't proactive, then we'll be the first country in the world where slavery and colonialism just dissolved away and we were all perfect. It doesn't happen like that, right? There were many things happening through the 60s and 70s to still oppress. And then the last thing I want to say, I round this off, the story I told you about the English people who can kill without mercy just because you're out half an hour after sunset. One of the intentional proactive things I talk about is Jennifer Smith, now Dame Jennifer. In that first PLP term, the crime, I'm about to say it, I don't think you all remember it. Walking abroad, wandering abroad. Still on the books. Not today, she took it off. Oh, yeah, exactly. Right. That was from that same proclamation. Right? And so that's what I mean. You've got to be intentional about these things. Wandering abroad. It was just men at night hanging out. We're still on the books until 98. So that's what I'm saying about the things that have to be intentional so that you can do this stuff, or at least like wave a flag when you get it done so that you can say, yeah, we're not like that anymore, or we've crushed that. Can I do one last thing? One last little quick thing? All right, one last thing. So, and it's not about cup match, it was about tourism. So one of the things in tourism in 1953, E.T. Richards brought a motion to Parliament to deal with the Hotel Keepers Act. The Hotel Keepers Act is what allowed managers and owners to say, no, you're black, don't come in. And by law, they were allowed that. And E.T. Richards thought that was an insult, and all kinds of big celebrities would come singing, but go through the back door, and we couldn't enter restaurants, and bad. So rather than deal with it, they set up a committee. And that committee produced a report. And the report included a message from the Trade Development Board. At the time, the Trade Development Board ran things. Like, it was about tourism and money, but how your grass had to be cut, the color of your house, the length of your shorts, whether you wear a bikini or not, how large your bike was, all was the Trade Development Board, okay, not the police. So the Trade Development Board said, if we do away with this Hotel Keepers Act, we will undermine decades of the white aesthetic that we have spent decades building up. Okay? And so you think, wait a minute, what? Like, Bermuda's society was built along what the Trade Development Board thought white elite Americans wanted. And so said, we can't make this change. Jack Tucker came out and said, the fastest way to starvation would be for us to give our guests something that they're not expecting. They're expecting exactly what they find and exactly what they have at home. That's how our society was managed. That was exactly... Okay, but let me round it off. So that was rude. Boy, that was rude. That was really rude. So that was 1955, right? And wow. And 2016, okay? So 2015, we had Carnival. And Carnival has one event called Juve. And Juve starts at like 3 in the morning. and ends at like noon or something like that. 9 o'clock. Okay. There was no license in the country to serve or sell alcohol at 3 o'clock in the morning. Right? You stopped at 3. So I can tell you, they little shimmy and let him through. But in 2016, the government, not this current one, remember 2016, passed a law that allowed Juve to happen. That right there, that law was, as far as I can find, the very first law about tourism that we actually changed for the black culture. Juve is not a white event. It's not a white aesthetic, right? Like the Hotel Keepers Act and the Trade Development Board and Jack Tucker said, right? Juve was definitely not who they thought was coming to Bermuda back then. And so I even told the BTA, right? You got to recognize these things or else we'll be forever thinking we have to be the way we were in the 50s. Now you better jump in before I think of something else.
Ladies and gentlemen, we want to thank Mr. Corey Butterfield for a wonderful presentation tonight. Thanks, man.
Hey, brother, man.
It was so thorough with the stories, the historical research, but particularly the context in terms of us being enslaved as former enslaved people. From a historical standpoint, from the time we arrived here, I think it's very thorough. I firmly believe that your presentation is a treasured presentation. And I believe that one of the reasons there's so much conversation is because you generate so much thought, part of the emotions in it, the energy, the humor. It's a wonderful presentation. I would just want to clarify that we do teach Bermuda history in the public school system. It is a graduation requirement. It's mandatory for every senior school student to graduate and obtain the credit. I would implore that you reach out to your child's teacher and ensure that they are delivering the curriculum. Because that's part of the issue. It's the written curriculum and the taught curriculum. The written curriculum is in place. It's about teaching it to make sure the teachers deliver it. You can go online, www.mod.pm. You can download the curriculum and see what's on charge. But Corey,
This is a rude front line, buddy. You got a rude front line here.
okay, this over here.
Okay.
We want to thank you
Oh,
again
thank
for,
you, brother.
for a
Thank
wonderful presentation. I want to say that I would like to say too, it's my personal view that the research that you've done can be used for the argument for reparations from a historical standpoint.
You're right.
That's really what's going to be necessary.
Yep.
So I'm sure that they'll be looking out for you. Bro.
Yeah, man. Definitely.
Thanks
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Mr. President? Yeah. Okay.
Sorry?
So I'll let the president come and make it. Mr. President Scott?
Gotcha.
The one thing that I also, good evening everyone, the one thing that I also wanted to mention is that both clubs are making a concerted effort to provide presentations like this going forward because we recognize that years gone by, this hasn't been, it hasn't really been in before. So what we're trying to do, guys, is really, I put my hand up and recognize that we need to do this outside of just the cup next time, but we're starting something. So we'd just like to encourage you to spread the word and say, you know what, not to get a plug for Somerset. I mean, really, this information, no, seriously, this information needs to be in discussions in everyone's households, you guys. It's next Thursday and Friday will be a battle, but this type of information has to be in conversations in our households, right? But we're doing our part. We're doing our part, as small as it may seem. We're taking, as they say, sometimes they gotta throw before you walk. So
Yeah, man.
So hold up, before we close up, hold up. Okay, one moment. Let me say what I can say. Before we have some refreshments, so at the end of the program, feel free to indulge in the refreshments here. We want to thank you for your time attending Somerset Cricket Club. On behalf of the Education Committee, we thank you for your presence. We wish you a safe and happy holiday.
You forgot to say that we were still the British.
Oh, let me sign out first before we say anything that might be offensive. Let me sign off. We want to thank you for joining us on this all-important discussion. We want to thank Corey for a brilliant presentation. And this discussion will be on the YouTube channel, TNN's YouTube channel, which is youtube.com at TNN BDA. Corey, thank you.
Good, man. Thank you. I'm glad you're sharing with the community. We need you.
Yes, sir.
We need you.
Bermuda, have a good evening.